Plami, and in this episode of Plami's Thoughts On, I'm gonna be sharing my thoughts on the 11th episode of the 6th season of Fear the Walking Dead. I believe the episode is called The Holding, which is the namesake of the community that our main characters end up finding themselves into in this episode. So there's quite a few things to talk about this episode. First of all, I want to say I really enjoyed it. After the last episode, which wasn't really a bad one, but it felt like the second worst episode of the season, and it probably was the worst written one. And it wasn't even that it was badly written, it's just that due to COVID and restrictions they had to use CGI walkers, which is pretty much the main reason why the episode doesn't really work for me, because I don't really feel the tension that the characters are supposed to be in, because they keep saying, oh, there's this giant horde in front of the gates of the community, but I don't really feel it, because when they do show it, it's like less than like a dozen of walkers that they could easily go out and kill with knives. But yeah, I'm going on a tangent here. Because of that, it felt like a little bit of a worst episode and probably the second worst episode of the season, but luckily this episode actually doesn't have that feeling at all. I'm really confused about how they weren't able to use walkers in the last episode because they couldn't have too many people in one place due to COVID. But then in this episode they have like a whole community of people who are very close to each other a lot of the time. And it's no problem whatsoever. Like in this episode, it doesn't feel like a COVID episode at all. So my suspicion is either this episode was shot before COVID, but that's not really the case because we have some behind the scenes photos which shows that it was shot during COVID. Or at least in the early days of COVID, maybe it was shot, but I don't know. Or, I don't know, they just didn't have the restrictions for the episode. I don't know. Because I don't understand how they managed to be so close, everybody to be so close to each other, when even in like Walking Dead 10C, we had so few characters per episode because of COVID. And even in some other shows, you can clearly see that they were put and shot in a certain way so as to not show us a lot of people being close to each other. But yeah, it was actually a really cool episode. It's supposedly a episode about Wes, who is a character that I want to like, but we haven't really gotten much of him for me to be able to like him. He seems like a cool guy, he seems like a very likable character, but we just haven't really gotten much from him. So it's cool that he got an episode to be focused on, but I definitely would have chosen other characters before him. I would have given him an episode as well, but I'm more interested in an episode focusing on Luciana, because Luciana is a character from the first 3 seasons. She should be held in a higher regard than the newbies from the last 3 seasons, no matter how much they are liked. But she's not, she's just another glorified extra, it feels like. Although I do think that this episode gave her a little bit more to do and appreciated her more. And honestly, it's interesting how this second half of the season is handling the focus episode idea, because in the first half of the season, all of our characters were split, so it fit for us to have to follow one character at a time per episode, or a few characters per episode. But in the second half, now that all the characters are together, they're still continuing with the idea of like, this episode is gonna focus on this character, but they still have like the whole cast, or a lot of the cast, in an episode. So because of that, even though this episode is like a Wes episode, all of the other characters also managed to move their storylines and get a moment to shine, which makes me wonder, why were they struggling so much in the last 2 seasons? Like, how? Like, at least one suspicion that I might have had is that maybe because they couldn't handle all the cast being together. So that was screwing with the writing, and they weren't able to make every character have something to do. But they clearly can do that because they did really well in this episode. It was a West-focused episode, so the main plot, I guess you could say, was about him and his brother that we met in this episode. But we also got a few moments in which Alicia shined, and by the end of the episode you would think that this was an Alicia episode. There were a couple of lines for Luciana, which gave her more weight to her character, I guess. And we got some movement on the storyline with Althea and her girlfriend from the CRM. So there was so much moving plot development in this episode, and I love that. I think it's one of the best episodes of the season, to be honestly. It's not my favorite episode of the season, although it's definitely up there, but it's probably the second best episode of the season. The best written one, the best executed one as well. There's only one small gripe that I have with it, although some would say that it's not a small gripe, but it's still something I can overlook even though it's stupid, but I'm gonna get into it. But yeah, the only other episode that I think was better made and better executed was the first episode of the season. I still think that episode is probably the best one because on its own, it felt like a mini Morgan movie. Like, you could have expanded on it a little bit more and it could have been an amazing Morgan Jones focused movie. And this episode kind of feels like that as well a little bit, but not exactly the same. So before we get into the things that I liked about the episode, let's get into the thing that I mentioned that bothered me about it, which is the scene with Alicia when they're trying to run away from the community and escape, and she ends up staying behind and lighting up the embalming fluid and sacrificing herself. During that scene, I was screaming all the time about them running and just get out faster, like the walkers can't buy them. So why the hell are they taking so long to go through them? Just scroll on the ground for fuck's sake and you're gonna be safer. You can just scroll on the ground and just move faster that way, but they just keep going at it slowly and slowly. And I still don't understand why Alicia can just go after them. She could have just drawn light the match and just run after them and get out. How the hell did the leader of that community manage to capture her? It's a little infuriating because she should be running away. But no, the plot needs her to be captured, so she gets captured. At the very least, it's still like a poetic idea that she is following her mother's footsteps, and I love how even the villain and technically the writers in the writing acknowledged how similar that is to what Madison did. And even in an earlier scene, they acknowledged that walker, that the main leader of the community, I think his name is Ollie or Riley, I think it's Riley, gets everybody to say what they see when they look at it. Alicia says that it reminds her of her mom, and that has been something that we the fans have been questioning and thinking about, that this walker actually looks like a walker version of Madison, and some of us speculated, oh well, I didn't, but some people speculated that it could be Madison, but it's not. But I like that the writers are kind of acknowledging that she looks similar to that. It makes me think that maybe the writers have started to acknowledge things that the fans have criticized, and that's kind of what has brought the development of how good this season is. I don't know, but like it feels like they're more self-aware with their faults and the things that people seem to have not liked about the previous two seasons. So they kind of acknowledge it and rectify it in this season. And honestly, I love that. It's been one of my favorite aspects of this season, how self-aware it is with the dialogue. And there was a lot of that in this episode as well. I just love how straightforward the dialogue is, because a lot of times The Walking Dead gets too far up its own ass, even when it's not Gimple. It just sometimes gets too far up its own ass trying to sound important when just simple dialogue could work wonders. So I love how direct a lot of the dialogue, especially by Alicia in this episode, is. I love that line where she's talking to the group after they get inside the community and have a look around, and they talk about trying to find out why Virginia was scared shitless from this community. And that's exactly Alicia's words. I just love how direct that is. You never really hear this kind of dialogue in The Walking Dead, and I love it whenever it happens. But Fear this season has been ripe with this kind of dialogue. What other scene was she not taking shit? I love how, again, a lot of people have been saying how they love how badass Alicia has been, but honestly, for me personally, the last two seasons, like season 4 and 5, I didn't really see it. For me, the badassness of Alicia came a little bit out of nowhere. Sure, she had some development in season 3 especially, mainly end of season 2 and season 3, where she had killed her first person, and then with the things she had to deal with in that bunker in season 3 at the end of it, was pretty badass of her. But this badass zombie killer thing that she has been doing in season 4 and 5, and that fans have been enjoying, I just never felt like it was earned. But in this episode of Fear, I actually think it's earned. It feels like she's finally growing into her mom's shoes. Like, the actions that Alicia took in this episode is 100% something that I can see her mom, aka Madison, doing. Like, her knowing that Wes's brother is suspicious and that he's not truly wanting to escape. Like, there's some kind of a plan behind that. I love how she knows that he is he's not true to what he says, and she ends up smacking him in the face. I love that. Although, I'm gonna give credit to the other characters as well. Althea and Luciana weren't far behind Alicia. They also were clearly in the know about Derek, who is Wes's brother's shenanigans, how he was acting a little suspicious. But that was a really cool scene, a really badass scene for Alicia. So yeah, let's go back a little bit and kind of start to recap the episode so I can make sure that I point out everything that I loved about it. So, in the beginning of the episode, we open up with that monologue by John Glover, who is the villain, I guess, of this next arc of Fear the Walking Dead. He's named Teddy. I've talked about my theory about who he is gonna end up being, and from some teasers and pretty much confirmation, I guess, by the writers, we know that this is going to be John Dory's father's, that one criminal that John talked about, that his father had to forge evidence so they could send him to prison or something like that, because he knew that he was the murderer, but he didn't have solid proof to show it in court, so he had to forge it. So we have a monologue from him, and usually this kind of thing, especially at this point in The Walking Dead's existence, it's just become very old to me, usually. I'm just tired of this kind of gimpo speak where the show tries to be super metaphorical and philosophical, and there's a time and a place, and I think it fits with this episode, but for the most part, usually I'm kind of tired of it, personally. But it did work in the beginning. I think it fits with the character of Teddy as well, so I'm okay with that. It was a nice beginning. I really like the character who is played by Nick Stahl. I'm not sure how you pronounce that name, but he is from Terminator 3, I believe. And when I saw that actor, I was wondering who he was, because he seemed so familiar, but it wasn't until I watched some reactions on YouTube that I realized that that's the guy from Terminator 3, which is the first Terminator that I've ever seen. I remember, I don't know, maybe when I was like, I don't know how old I was, but like when I was a kid, I remember watching that ending scene where they didn't manage to save the world, and I remember that one scene with the forgot the word for it. That scene with the coffin where the Terminator is carrying, I believe, John Connor in the coffin. That actor who played John Connor in that movie is Nick Stahl, and I really liked him. He's very charismatic in my opinion. He was very fun to watch, and it took me a while to realize that it was him, but I just like that character more, and I hope he stays around for a little longer. But I kind of don't expect that. I'm assuming that by the end of the season, especially because of how secretive the show seems to be about where the season's gonna go, I'm assuming that by the end of it, he's gonna be dead. And by the way, talking about the end of the season, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna theorize that maybe because they've said that there's gonna be a long time skip, and with what the next episode in Dreams is going to be about, my theory is that maybe at the end of the season they're gonna actually blow up the nuke, use the nuke from the submarine. I honestly feel like with how crazily good Fear the Walking Dead has been this season, I think they actually might go for that. I mean, last season they had a nuclear meltdown and the US seems to be fine, so what the hell is a nuke? I think that could be something really cool, but considering we have seen no effects whatsoever on the rest of the US in the main show, which is supposed to be about 7 years after Fear, where Fear is right now, I mean, I don't know whether the canon would allow them to do it, you know, because you would think that you would see some effects on the main show, but we haven't, so I don't know, but it would be something really cool, because, like, yes, this is a cool possibility that, and a threat that our main characters have to deal with a suicide code that wants to blow up the world, or at least the US, but if they don't actually do it, it feels like an empty threat. It's like, if you watch my cartoon reactions, whenever in like TMNT 2012, a character goes for the head of a living being, knowing that because it's a cartoon, that character is almost definitely gonna catch it and not gonna get stabbed in the head, because that would be too gruesome for a cartoon. It kind of feels like that. Like, sure, it works, but it kind of feels cheap when I know that you're not going to go with, you were never going to go through with it anyway. But still, it's a cool idea, so I'm very excited to see where they're going to go with it. So yeah, we have this whole introduction of our main characters to this community and all the interviews and everything, and we find out the new name for zombies, posters. I guess it makes sense, but I don't know how I feel about it. I don't really care about it. I personally have a really cool name for zombies that I'm keeping for my ongoing zombie story, Dead Inside, which you should definitely check out on my Wattpad. Although I haven't really posted a new chapter in quite a few months, probably half a year at this point. I just don't really have the time. I don't know. But it's a really cool name, so if you're interested to find it out, check out the story. And yeah, there's a lot of cool dialogue in these scenes as well. From what I remember, the next scene is the scene in which he's asking about what they see when they look at that walker that looks like Madison. And I think all of them say a little different things, but somehow it all comes to all of them talking about their brothers, which is something that I did not realize, that all of them had brothers. For Alicia, of course, I remember Nick. For Althea, I've heard a couple of times that she has a brother, but I have never really felt the weight of it. Although with the way she talks about him in this episode, I'm really suspicious that her brother might be Aaron from The Walking Dead. Because in that scene where Riley asks everyone about their brothers, she and Wes are the only ones who don't say the names of their brothers. One, it could be because we know Luciana's brother's name and Alicia's brother's name, but on the other hand, could be because in this episode we couldn't have known the name of Wes's brother, because if he said his name in that scene, in that moment, then Riley would have known that Derek was the same Derek who is Wes's brother, most likely. Thus meaning that if Althea mentioned the name of her brother, we would have known that it was Aaron. So I don't know, maybe that's something that I can go with, and maybe they're trying to keep it for at some point in the future, but I don't know, I think it actually could be kind of cool and make Althea a little bit more important of a character with like more weight. It would add more weight to her character, because to me the characters from the main show just have more weight and more interest from me than the characters who were introduced, especially the characters introduced in season 4, 5 and 6 of Fear, although for season 6 they've definitely had more weight to them. But yeah, okay, what else? We have that scene in which Wes and Derek meet. It was kind of obvious that that was going to happen, especially because of some of the teasers that I've seen, and because this was a Wes focus episode. I was pretty much sure that that's exactly what was going to happen. But you could also kind of seen it in the foreshadowing a few episodes ago. Like if you remember in episode 6 when which was a June focused episode when Tank Town got blown up. If you remember, in that episode, Virginia says to Wes, asks about his brother, and he says that he's dead. And it's kind of subtle when you think about it, because she accuses Wes of being with the End is the Beginning group and talks about his brother, when in fact it was him who was working with the End is the Beginning group. It was the brother who was working with the End is the Beginning group and not Wes. So it's funny when you think about it. It's a very fun foreshadowing, so I like that. But yeah, I didn't really feel too much towards his brother, again because Wes hasn't really had that much screen time, let alone character development for me to care about him. But it's always cool when characters in the zombie apocalypse meet with their relatives, although it definitely would have held more weight if we had seen him even in a flashback, you know? But yeah, right off the bat you could feel that his brother was a little bit of a weirdo, although I gotta say, he definitely has the skill for painting. There's like one painting in the episode of zombies in like a green forest, and I honestly want that on a t-shirt. I actually might have put this as the thumbnail for this video just because of how much I fucking love how it looks. But yeah, it looks so cool. It's such a cool art. So he has the points from me, at least in the art department. He's amazing with that. But yeah, I don't really care too much about Wes's brother. It does develop Wes's character a little bit, so I guess that's cool, but I don't really care too much about him, you know? My focus for this episode was more on the group in general, not really the Wes stuff. Although I think it actually was really nice. Although there was a couple of moments of Wes being kind of typically stupid when a character is in this kind of situation where he doesn't want to believe that his brother is working with this group and trying to hurt people, which is understandable, but I can definitely see how some people would find that very annoying, because in that one scene where Wes and Althea were searching through through Derek's bed, they find maps from the CRM, and Wes says that doesn't mean anything, which is very fucking stupid, because these maps should not be in his possession. So obviously he was the one who did all this stuff, or at least knew about it. But so it's infuriating that Wes is refusing to believe it. But it's cool that I think in like the following scene where he's talking to his brother in private-ish, he stands up to him in regards to that, and it's not stupid and doesn't reveal where the location of Morgan's community is. So that kind of redeemed his character in a way for his stupidity earlier, so I'm fine with that. And again, at the end of the episode where he ends up having to kill his brother, it does add to Wes's character, so I definitely care more about him. But yeah, that definitely wasn't where the excitement for this episode came from me. It was mainly the dialogue, Alicia's badassery in this episode, which is funny because in her actual episode, I was so bored by it. I hated it. In my opinion, it's the worst episode of the season. And I guess in that episode as well, the best thing about it was some of the scenes in which Alicia was badass. But in this episode, that was actually pretty good for the character that it was focused on. She still managed to somehow outshine him, so there's that, I guess. But I just love all the sequences in which she has to fight, like the one in the elevator where she just smacks Derek in the face. That was badass. Then at the end of the episode, when she ends up sacrificing herself so the rest can escape, and she has to fight off that guy who wants to embalm her, that was super badass. It was a really cool fight sequence. And I also noticed that in that ending scene where she's talking to that guy Teddy, they had used some of the dialogue from that scene for the trailers for the second half, but in that scene they were definitely different takes that they used. But I honestly kind of like the takes that they did in the actual episode a little bit more, because it feels more honest to the scene and more realistic, because Alicia was kicked down and was fighting a guy, so she's out of breath and she's slowly saying that, so you are the king of the crazies. And I love that. In that whole scene, I love the dialogue. I love how no shit's given Alicia is. She doesn't give a shit. She doesn't buy whatever shit this guy is selling. It's a really cool contrast to use the more grounded dialogue of this season in comparison to this very theatrical villain. I think it actually works really well, in my opinion. Especially in that moment where Teddy kind of becomes a little scary when he screams, "You destroyed it!" I kind of actually fear him a little bit, I guess. Kind of like Negan. Although he's definitely ultimately not as threatening as him. Although we're gonna have to see a little bit more of him to decide. But he's definitely a really, really cool villain, for sure. And I gotta say, the fact that we're dealing with a code in this a doomsday code in this season of Fear is making me doubt whether we're gonna be dealing with a code in season 11 of The Walking Dead, because my theory about the Reapers that we met in in season 10C was, first of all, that they were probably going to be villains only for 10C, which didn't turn out to be the case, but it seems like they're going to be villains for at least 11A, or at least the first few episodes of season 11. And my theory is that they're probably going to be some kind of a code, religious code, because they say the guy that attacks Maggie says, "Pope marked you," which makes me believe that they're gonna be some kind of a religious cult, which I think it's gonna be cool to see. But The Walking Dead has a tendency to have some cool ideas, but never really go far enough with them, and by the time it's done, it kind of feels like it didn't go anywhere. Like Negan, when he was introduced, he was hell of a villain. He was scary, he was threatening. But by the end of season 8, I just wanted it to be over, which is a common complaint. But even with the Whisperers, which was a much more condensed storyline, when they were introduced, they were creepy, they were scary, they were genuinely terrifying, and felt like they were serious horror villains. And then in season 10, they're just like another group. I feel like because of that, I don't really trust The Walking Dead to do the concept of a religious cult justice, I guess, in a way. I don't know. But yeah, he's still a really cool villain, and I really love the dialogue that he had with Alicia. It was so cool. Although, one thing confuses me about how the hell did he know the way Madison died? Because he says to Alicia, when he asks her why she sacrificed herself, whether she was punishing herself, trying to be noble, or following her mom's footsteps. How does he know that Madison burned the place to the ground? Because I watched some of the earlier scenes in which Alicia is talking about her mom, and she doesn't mention how Madison died. So does he mean it specifically in like her sacrificing herself just like her mom did, or specifically talking about her sacrificing herself by burning a place down just like her mom did? It could be either way, but considering that it was very, very similarly shot intentionally, it's a little confusing, you know? But yeah, I'm curious where they're going to go with Alicia's relationship with this villain and what they're gonna do with it, especially because he also kind of looks similar to Proctor John from season 3, which is another thing in a long list of similarities that season 6 of this show has with season 3. Other things like a fucking damn, a dialogue that trashes Gimpo speak, shit ton of cool characters and villains. It's like it's so similar in so many ways. And having the villain at the end of the season that wasn't the villain for most of the season be very similar to Proctor John and have a weird relationship with Alicia is another thing that is so similar. So I don't know, maybe the writers are trying to kind of win the OG fans over by trying to emulate storylines that were never developed because the show kind of got rebooted with season 4. I don't know, but I'm still curious to see where they're going to go with this. So yeah, those are my thoughts for this episode. In terms of a rating for this episode, I think I'm actually going to give it like a 9 out of 10. For me, as I said, the first episode of the season is the best one by far. For me, it's like a 10 out of 10 episode with no faults whatsoever. Although there are some nitpicks you could have with it, I enjoy it thoroughly. So, as I said, this episode is probably my second best, not second favorite, second best episode of the season. So, I'm gonna give this one a 9 out of 10. And this might totally be different from the ratings that I would have given to the other episodes. But that's how I feel about it right now, so that's what I'm giving it. And yeah, what did you guys think of this episode? Comment down below. I'll be really happy to hear your thoughts and opinions, and so we could have some discussion about it. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Also, check out the description to my Twitter if you don't follow me there, and to my Wattpad where I post my stories, because in addition to doing all these videos on my channel, I'm also a writer. And if you don't enjoy my stories, or you simply enjoy my videos, you can head over to Patreon where you can pledge support and help with the channel going and help support me so I can keep writing stories you enjoy. But if you don't want to do it, that's completely fine. You can still help me out in other ways, like liking this video, subscribing, and especially sharing this video with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And I think it's pretty much it for this video, so hopefully I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye!